The interview was supposed to last 45 minutes. It lasted 6 hours. Not because Detective Sarah Voss was unprepared, not because the subject was uncooperative, not because anything went wrong in the conventional sense of things going wrong in an interrogation room. It lasted 6 hours because the man sitting across the table from her was the most controlled human being she had ever encountered, and control, in Sarah's experience, was never the sign of an innocent man. Innocent men fall apart in interrogation rooms. They cry or they get angry or they ask the same questions over and over. Why am I here? When can I leave? Do I need a lawyer? They are undone by the unfairness of it, by the institutional weight of a small room with a camera in the corner and a detective who has already decided something about them. The man across the table from Sarah did none of these things. He sat. He answered questions. He maintained eye contact in precisely the right measure. Not too much, which would signal aggression, and not too little, which would signal evasion. He spoke clearly and at a measured pace. He expressed appropriate concern. He said all the right things. He was perfect, and that was exactly the problem. His name was Thomas Greer. He was 48 years old. He was an architect. He had been married for 16 years to a woman named Claire, who had been reported missing 4 days ago. Claire Greer was 44 years old. She was a pediatric nurse. She had not shown up for her shift on a Tuesday morning. She had not answered her phone. She had not been seen by any neighbor or colleague or friend since Sunday evening, when she had been observed by her next-door neighbor, a retired teacher named Margaret, getting into her car and driving away. The car had been found Monday morning, parked at a trailhead 12 miles from their home. Claire had hiked that trail before. It was not unusual for her to go alone on weekends, but she had not come back. The search of the trail had found nothing, and Thomas Greer had not reported his wife missing until Tuesday evening, more than 48 hours after Margaret had last seen her. When Sarah asked him why he had waited, he said he had assumed she was staying with a friend, that they had argued on Sunday and she sometimes needed space. He said this calmly. He said it with the particular sadness of a man who has accepted that his behavior looks bad and has decided that the best strategy is to acknowledge it directly. Sarah had been doing this job for 19 years. She did not believe him. The argument, Thomas said, had been about money. Claire had discovered that he had withdrawn a significant amount from their joint savings account without telling her. He said he had been planning to reinvest it. He said he should have told her. He said he was sorry he hadn't. Sarah asked how much. He said $40,000. Sarah wrote this down. She asked where the money was now. He said he had transferred it to a separate account in his name. He provided the account details without being asked. He had the information ready. He produced it from his jacket pocket, already written on a piece of paper, as if he had prepared for this question. Sarah looked at the paper. She looked at him. She said, "You came prepared." He said, "I knew you would ask. I wanted to make it easy for you." She said, "That's very cooperative." He said, "I have nothing to hide." Sarah had been doing this for 19 years. She had heard those 4 words from guilty men more times than she could count. She took a break at the 2-hour mark. She went to the observation room where her partner, Detective James Okafor, had been watching. James said, "He's good." Sarah said, "He's very good." James said, "Too good." Sarah said. "Nobody is that calm when their wife is missing." "Nobody," James said. "Unless they know she's not coming back," Sarah said. "Unless they know she's not coming back." She went back into the room. In the third hour, she changed her approach. She stopped asking about the argument. She stopped asking about the money. She started asking about Claire. She asked Thomas to describe his wife. Not the facts, not her job, her age, her appearance. She asked him to describe who she was, what she was like, what he loved about her. This was the question she used when she wanted to see what was underneath the control. Most people, asked to describe someone they love, lose the careful architecture of their self-presentation. They become specific. They reach for details that are too small to be strategic. They smile without meaning to, or they cry, or they look at something in the middle distance that only they can see. Thomas Greer answered the question the way he had answered all the others. Measured, appropriate, correct. He said Claire was kind, that she was dedicated to her work, that she was funny in a dry way that took the best coffee he had ever tasted, and that he had never told her this, and now he wished he had. It was a good answer. It was exactly the right answer, and that was what was wrong with it. Sarah had asked this question to hundreds of people in 19 years. She had heard good answers and bad ones, articulate ones and stumbling ones, answers that broke her heart and answers that made her angry. She had never heard an answer that was exactly right. Because love is not exact. Love is specific and irrational and full of details that don't add up. Love is the coffee thing, yes, but it is also the thing she does with her hands when she's nervous, and the way she laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them, and the specific way a room feels different when she is in it versus when she is not. Thomas Greer gave her the coffee thing. He gave her nothing else. In the fourth hour, Sarah's phone buzzed. She excused herself. James was in the hallway. He said, "We found something." The financial investigator they had brought in that morning had been going through Thomas and Claire's accounts. What she found was not the $40,000 Thomas had mentioned. What she found was a pattern. Over the past 3 years, Thomas had moved money, not in large amounts, in amounts small enough to go unnoticed in the ordinary review of household finances. Transfers to accounts that, on examination, turned out to be registered to shell companies that existed on paper and nowhere else. Over 3 years, the total came to approximately $340,000. Claire had found the $40,000. She had not found the rest. But she had been asking questions, according to her colleague at the hospital, a nurse named Donna who had spoken to investigators that morning, for several weeks before she disappeared. She had been distracted, worried. She had told Donna that she had found something in their finances that she didn't understand and that Thomas had explained it, but that the explanation hadn't satisfied her. She had told Donna she was thinking about calling a lawyer. She had said this on a Friday. She had disappeared on a Sunday. Sarah went back into the room. She sat down. She looked at Thomas Greer for a long moment without speaking. He looked back, steady, patient. She said, $340,000. Something moved behind his eyes. Very small, very brief. Gone before she could fully identify it. He said, "I don't know what you mean." She said, "Yes, you do." He said, "I'd like to speak to my lawyer." She said, "That's your right." She stood up. She said, "Thomas, before your lawyer gets here, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." He looked at her. She said, "Where is Claire?" He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "I want my lawyer." The lawyer arrived at 7:30 p.m. The interview ended. Thomas Greer was not charged that night. Sarah did not have enough. Not yet. She had a financial pattern, a motive, a timeline, and a man who was too controlled to be innocent and too careful to be caught. But she had something else. She had the moment. The fraction of a second when she had said $340,000, and something had moved behind his eyes. She had seen it. James had seen it on the monitor. It was not evidence. It would not hold up in court. But it told her what she already knew. And it told her that Claire Greer was not on a hiking trail. The investigation that followed lasted 11 weeks. Sarah and James worked methodically through every layer of Thomas Greer's life. His finances, his phone records, his movements over the preceding 6 months. They spoke to his colleagues, his clients, his neighbors, his friends. They found a woman named Reeves, a colleague from 3 years ago. She had left the architecture firm where Thomas worked under circumstances that, when Sarah finally reached her living in another state, she described carefully and with the assistance of a lawyer. She said Thomas Greer had approached her in a way that had made her afraid, that she had not reported it because she had not thought anyone would believe her, that she had left the firm and moved away and had spent 3 years trying not to think about it. She described a man who had said to her face on one occasion, "I always find a way to manage situations that become difficult." She had understood what he meant. She had left the following week. Claire Greer was found on a Thursday morning, 53 days after she was reported missing. She was found in a drainage area 12 miles from the trailhead where her car had been abandoned. She was found because a maintenance worker noticed a disturbance in the ground that had been covered by fallen leaves and the early months of a wet autumn. The medical examiner's report established the cause of death and the time frame. She had died within 24 hours of her last confirmed sighting. Thomas Greer had reported her missing 36 hours after her death. He had spent those 36 hours continuing his normal routine, going to work, answering emails, having lunch with a colleague, living the life of a man whose wife was missing and who did not yet know it, except that he did know it. Thomas Greer was arrested on a Friday morning. He walked to the police car with the same measured steadiness he had brought to every other moment of the investigation. He said nothing. He looked straight ahead. At trial, his attorney argued that the financial evidence established motive but not guilt, that the physical evidence was circumstantial, that the prosecution was presenting a story, not a case. The prosecution presented the story carefully and in full. They presented the money, the timeline, the woman who had moved to another state, the 36 hours. The moment in the interview room that Sarah described from the witness stand with the precision of someone who has replayed it in her mind many times. She said, "In 19 years of conducting interviews, I have never seen a man that controlled. Control like that is not innocence, it is preparation, and preparation requires knowing in advance what questions are coming. The only way to know what questions are coming is to know what happened." The jury deliberated for 2 days. They returned a verdict of guilty. Thomas Greer was sentenced to life in prison. Sarah Voss still works homicide. She still conducts interviews. She still asks people to describe the people they love and watches what happens underneath the words. She thinks about Thomas Greer sometimes, about 6 hours in a small room, with a man who said all the right things and felt nothing. She thinks about Claire Greer, who found something in a spreadsheet and asked questions and deserved better answers than she got. She thinks about the fraction of a second when she said $340,000 and something moved behind his eyes. She thinks about control, about how it is the thing that people reach for when they are afraid of being seen, about how in the end it is always the thing that gives them away. Because perfect control is its own kind of confession. And Sarah Voss has been listening to confessions for 19 years. She knows one when she hears it, even when no words are spoken. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.